Your sister is twice the woman you'll ever be, Alicia." My mother's voice rang out across the dining room, cutting through the warm chatter of Thanksgiving dinner like a serrated blade. 23 relatives turned their heads in my direction, forks pausing mid-bite, as if watching a car accident unfold in slow motion. I set down my wineglass with deliberate calm, my hand steady despite the familiar sting of humiliation washing over me. The golden turkey at the center of the table seemed to mock me with its perfect presentation, just like everything else in this house always appeared flawless on the surface. "Wonderful," I replied, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "Then she can give back the $80,000 I spent on her wedding." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Uncle Robert, who never stopped talking about his fishing trips, sat frozen with his mouth half open. My father nearly choked on his cranberry sauce, coughing violently while my mother's face drained of all color. My sister Vanessa looked like she'd seen a ghost. My name is Alicia. I'm 29 years old, and I work as a procurement manager for Oakenlight Publishing in Portland, Oregon. I've spent the last 8 years climbing the corporate ladder at one of the most respected publishing houses on the West Coast, negotiating million-dollar deals with suppliers and managing budgets that could fund small towns. Yet somehow, in my mother's eyes, I've never measured up to my younger sister Vanessa, the eternal golden child who could do no wrong. Growing up, I was the responsible one. While Vanessa spent her teenage years sneaking out to parties and dating boys our parents disapproved of, I was buried in textbooks, earning straight A's and working part-time jobs to save for college. When Vanessa dropped out of community college after one semester to pursue her dream of becoming an influencer, I was graduating summa cum laude with a business degree and landing my first corporate job. But none of that mattered to my parents. Vanessa was beautiful, charming, and vivacious. She had that effortless way of lighting up a room that everyone seemed to adore. I was the practical one, the boring one, the daughter who sent birthday cards on time and remembered anniversaries, but somehow never sparked the same pride in my mother's eyes. The pattern had been set in stone for years. Vanessa would make impulsive decisions, create chaos, and somehow emerge as the victim who needed rescuing. I would be the one expected to clean up the mess, usually with my wallet. My parents never asked directly, but the hints were always there. Vanessa was struggling. Vanessa needed help. Surely Alicia could spare a little assistance for family. And like a fool, I always did. 6 months ago, when Vanessa announced her engagement to Tyler, a wannabe musician who'd never held a steady job in his life, I should have seen what was coming. The way my mother's eyes lit up as she started planning the wedding of the century, the way she casually mentioned the venue costs, the photographer prices, the catering expenses, the way she sighed dramatically about how tight money was since my father's small accounting firm had lost 2 major clients. I should have walked away then. I should have said no when the requests started rolling in. But family was family, and somehow I found myself writing check after check, telling myself it was an investment in Vanessa's happiness. The venue deposit, the dress alterations, the flowers, the photographer, the honeymoon suite in Cabo. $80,000 later, I realized I'd been played. Now, sitting at this Thanksgiving table surrounded by my extended family, listening to my mother once again sing Vanessa's praises while diminishing my achievements, something inside me finally snapped. The words had tumbled out before I could stop them, and there was no taking them back. The truth was finally on the table, served alongside the sweet potatoes and stuffing. The aftermath of my announcement spread through the dining room like spilled wine on white linen. Aunt Patricia dropped her fork with a clatter. My cousin David's wife grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with shock. My grandmother, bless her heart, was the first to break the silence. $80,000? She whispered, her weathered hand clutching her chest. Sweet Jesus, Alicia. My mother recovered first, her face flushing red as she attempted damage control. Alicia, this is neither the time nor the place for such discussions. We have guests. Funny, I said, taking a slow sip of my wine. It seemed like the perfect time when you were telling these same guests how inadequate I am compared to my sister. Vanessa finally found her voice, though it came out as more of a squeak. Alicia, you're being dramatic. You offered to help with the wedding. No one forced you. Offered? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me refresh your memory. It started with Mom calling me in tears because you two couldn't afford the venue you'd already put a deposit on. Then it was the dress emergency when you decided the first one wasn't special enough. Then the photographer cancellation crisis. Then the flower shortage panic. Should I continue? My father set down his glass of wine, his face grave. Now, hold on, Alicia. Your mother and I never asked you to spend that kind of money. You didn't have to ask directly, Dad. You just painted the picture perfectly. Poor Vanessa's dream wedding was falling apart. The family reputation was at stake. And who else could possibly save the day but reliable Alicia with her steady job and no husband or children to spend money on? The last part stung as I said it, but it was the truth. At 29, I was the only unmarried child in my extended family. My success at work had come at the cost of personal relationships. While my peers were getting married and starting families, I was working 60-hour weeks and traveling for business. My mother never let me forget that particular failing. I remember you being excited about helping, Vanessa said, her voice defensive. You said you wanted to contribute to making my day special. I was excited, I admitted, because I thought I was helping my sister create beautiful memories. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the thing that brought our family closer together. I thought you'd appreciate the sacrifice I was making. Sacrifice? My mother's voice rose an octave. You make it sound like we held a gun to your head. You didn't need a gun, Mom. You had something much more effective. You had guilt, manipulation, and the promise that someday my contribution would be acknowledged and appreciated. Instead, 6 months later, I'm sitting here being told I'm half the woman my sister is. The weight of 8 years of accumulated resentment was pouring out of me now, and I couldn't stop it. Every birthday where Vanessa's gifts were praised while mine were overlooked. Every holiday where her latest boyfriend was welcomed with open arms while my work achievements were dismissed as boring. Every family gathering where she was the star while I was the reliable wallflower. Vanessa's been through a lot, my mother said, her voice taking on that familiar protective tone. The wedding stress, adjusting to married life, Tyler's music career struggles, she needs our support. And what about what I've been through? I asked. The 70-hour work weeks to afford your definition of family support, the sacrificed vacations, the depleted savings account, the sleepless nights wondering if I'll have enough left to buy my own house someday. My Aunt Patricia cleared her throat uncomfortably. Maybe we should change the subject. This is family business. No, I said firmly. This became everyone's business the moment Mom decided to use our family dinner as a platform to publicly humiliate me. If she wants to air family dynamics in front of everyone, then everyone gets to hear the whole story. Vanessa's husband, Tyler, who'd been silent throughout the entire exchange, finally spoke up. Look, we never asked for that much money. Things just kept coming up. Things kept coming up because you two had champagne tastes on a beer budget, I replied. And instead of scaling back or waiting until you could afford the wedding you wanted, you let me bankroll your fairy tale. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was having this conversation at Thanksgiving, a holiday supposedly about gratitude. I'd spent years being grateful for the opportunity to help my family, grateful that I had the means to contribute, grateful for any scraps of acknowledgement that came my way. But gratitude, I was learning, had to be reciprocal to mean anything. My mother's face had gone from red to pale, and I could see the calculations running behind her eyes. She was probably trying to figure out how to minimize the damage, how to spin this back in Vanessa's favor, how to make me the unreasonable one again. But something told me those days were over. The tension in the room was suffocating. My cousin Jennifer tried to break it by asking if anyone wanted more wine. but her voice sounded strained and false. The magnificent feast my mother had spent days preparing sat cooling on the table, forgotten in the wake of my revelation. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," my father said carefully, his accountant's mind probably calculating the exact figure I'd mentioned. 80,000 seems excessive for a wedding. "Would you like to see the receipts, Dad?" I pulled out my phone, my fingers already swiping to the folder where I'd meticulously documented every expense. 25,000 for the venue, 12,000 for catering upgrades because the basic package wasn't good enough, 8,000 for the photographer Vanessa insisted on after she fired the first one, 5,000 for flowers when she decided roses weren't exotic enough, 4,000 for her dress alterations and veil, 3,000 for the honeymoon suite upgrade, and that's just the big-ticket items. With each number I recited, Vanessa seemed to shrink further into her chair. Tyler had gone completely silent, probably realizing for the first time exactly how much money his wife's family had contributed to their lifestyle. "The wedding cost $60,000, my mother protested weakly. "You can't possibly have paid 80. "You're forgetting the honeymoon expenses," I said. "The flights to Cabo, the resort upgrades, the excursions, the shopping money. And then there were the engagement party costs, the bridal shower expenses, and the various wedding-related emergencies that kept cropping up." My grandmother shook her head slowly. "In my day, people got married at the courthouse and had cake at their mother's house. All this extravagance is just foolishness." "Grandma's right," I said. "But I was foolish enough to enable it because I thought it mattered to my family. I thought contributing to Vanessa's happiness would mean something. I thought maybe if I proved how much I cared, how much I was willing to sacrifice, I'd finally earn the same love and respect she gets just for existing." The words hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. This was the heart of it, the wound I'd been carrying for 29 years. The constant feeling that no matter what I achieved, no matter how responsible or successful I became, I would always be the consolation prize daughter. "That's not fair," Vanessa said, tears forming in her eyes. "I never asked you to compete with me." "You didn't have to ask," I replied. "The competition was built into our family structure from day one. Perfect Vanessa, who could do no wrong, and practical Alicia, who existed to clean up the messes." My mother's jaw tightened. "I love both my daughters equally." "Do you?" I challenged. "Because your actions say otherwise. When was the last time you bragged about my promotion to your friends? When was the last time you asked about my life without immediately segueing into Vanessa's latest drama? When was the last time you defended me the way you just defended her?" The silence that followed was deafening. Around the table, my relatives were studying their plates, their hands, anything but the family implosion happening before their eyes. This wasn't the Thanksgiving dinner anyone had expected. "I think you're being unfair," my mother said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm being honest," I corrected. "Maybe for the first time in years. And honesty feels unfair when you've been living in a carefully constructed fantasy." Tyler suddenly pushed back from the table. "I think we should go." "Sit down, Tyler," Vanessa snapped, the first real fire I'd seen from her all evening. "This is my family, a family that's airing very private financial business in front of everyone," he replied, his discomfort obvious. "Private financial business that became public the moment my contribution was erased from the narrative," I said. "You want to leave? Fine, but you're not taking the moral high ground with you." My father rubbed his temples, looking every one of his 62 years. "How did we get here? This was supposed to be a nice family dinner. We got here because someone decided to use this nice family dinner as an opportunity to publicly diminish one daughter while elevating the other," I said. "We got here because I finally reached my limit of being treated like a second-class family member despite being the one who consistently shows up, contributes, and sacrifices." "Alicia," my Aunt Patricia said gently, "family relationships are complicated. Maybe some things are better discussed privately." "I've tried discussing things privately for years," I replied. The result was $80,000 in wedding expenses and a Thanksgiving dinner where I'm told I'm half the woman my sister is. Clearly, the private approach wasn't working. The truth was, I'd been building toward this moment for months. Every time I logged into my bank account and saw the depleted balance. Every time I had to decline social invitations because I couldn't afford them after funding Vanessa's dream wedding. Every time my mother casually mentioned how happy Vanessa was in her marriage, while asking when I was going to find someone and settle down. The breaking point had been 2 weeks ago, when I'd received the wedding photos Vanessa had finally gotten around to sharing. Beautiful, professional pictures of her perfect day. Not a single thank you note had accompanied them. Not a single acknowledgement of how that perfect day had been made possible. Instead, I'd gotten a text. "Aren't these amazing? Tyler and I are thinking about doing a first anniversary party. Nothing big, just family." That's when I knew this dinner was coming. That's when I knew the truth would eventually surface. I just hadn't expected it to happen quite so dramatically. But looking around the table at my family's shocked faces, I realized I didn't regret it. The truth was messy and uncomfortable, but it was finally out there. No more pretending everything was fine. No more swallowing my resentment for the sake of family harmony. The question now was what would happen next. The uncomfortable silence stretched on until my cousin David's 5-year-old daughter broke it by asking loudly, "Mommy, why is everyone so quiet? Did somebody die?" A nervous laugh rippled through the room, but the tension remained thick as fog. My mother seized the opportunity to regain control of the situation. "I think we should all take a breath and remember this is Thanksgiving," she said, her voice artificially bright. "We're here to be grateful for what we have, not to dredge up old grievances." Old grievances? I felt my composure slipping. "Mom, this happened 6 months ago. The last payment for Vanessa's honeymoon cleared my account in July. How is that old?" "Alicia, please," my father interjected. "Can't we discuss this later? Your aunt and uncle drove 3 hours to be here, and they got quite a show," I replied. "But don't worry, Dad. I wouldn't want to further embarrass the family by continuing to tell the truth." I stood up from the table, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Thank you for dinner, Mom. It was truly enlightening." "Where are you going?" Vanessa asked, panic creeping into her voice. "Home. I suddenly don't have much of an appetite." "Alicia, don't be dramatic," my mother called after me as I headed toward the coat closet. "You're blowing this completely out of proportion." I turned back to face the table, where 23 pairs of eyes were watching me like I was a wild animal that might attack at any moment. Out of proportion? Let me tell you what's out of proportion. It's expecting your daughter to fund her sister's wedding, and then publicly humiliating her 6 months later. It's taking $80,000 from someone, and never once acknowledging the sacrifice they made. It's spending 29 years making someone feel like they're not good enough, while simultaneously expecting them to bankroll the family's happiness. Tyler had gone pale. $80,000 is a lot of money," he said quietly. "Thank you, Tyler. I'm glad someone finally acknowledges that fact." "We didn't know it was that much," he continued, shooting a confused look at Vanessa. "You told me your parents were helping with the wedding." Vanessa's face flushed crimson. They were helping. "Alicia is family. It's the same thing." "No, it's not the same thing," I said firmly. "When parents help with a wedding, it's a gift from one generation to the next. When a sister empties her savings account, it's a loan that apparently no one intends to acknowledge, let alone repay." "We never said we wouldn't pay you back," Vanessa protested. "You never said you would either. In fact, in 6 months, the subject has never come up once. Not when you posted pictures of your new furniture. Not when you went on that weekend trip to wine country last month. Not when Tyler bought that expensive guitar 2 weeks ago." Tyler's mouth fell open. "That guitar cost $3,000. If we owe Alicia $80,000, maybe I should have waited." "You think?" I said sarcastically. But don't worry, Tyler. According to my mother, your wife is twice the woman I'll ever be, so I'm sure she'll figure out how to make this right. My grandmother cleared her throat. Alicia, dear, come sit back down. Let's talk about this properly. Grandma, I love you, but there's nothing left to talk about. I've spent 8 years of my adult life being the family ATM while being treated like the family disappointment. I'm done. You're not a disappointment, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing, Dad? When was the last time you asked about my work without immediately changing the subject? When was the last time either of you visited my apartment or showed any interest in my life that didn't involve what I could contribute to this family financially? The questions hung in the air unanswered, because we all knew the truth. My parents' relationship with me had become transactional somewhere along the way. I was the reliable daughter who could be counted on to solve problems with her checkbook, but I wasn't the daughter they bragged about or prioritized emotionally. That's not true, my mother said weakly. Isn't it? When I got promoted to senior procurement manager last year, what did you say when I called to tell you? My mother's silence was telling. You said, "That's nice, honey. Did you hear Vanessa's thinking about starting a blog?" I continued. When I closed the biggest supplier contract in my company's history, what was your response? More silence. You asked if I thought Vanessa and Tyler needed new living room furniture because theirs looked shabby in her Instagram photos. My Aunt Patricia looked uncomfortable. Alicia, I'm sure your parents are proud of you. Are they? Because I haven't seen evidence of that pride in years. What I've seen is a family that takes my financial contributions for granted while treating my sister like she hung the moon for managing to exist. Vanessa's had struggles, my mother said defensively. We've all had struggles, Mom. The difference is I handled mine without expecting my family to bail me out financially and emotionally at every turn. I don't expect anyone to bail me out, Vanessa said, her voice rising. Don't you? When you couldn't afford your dream wedding, who did you call? When you needed a co-signer for your apartment lease, who did you ask? When Tyler's band needed equipment money, where did you turn? And now when you want to throw a first anniversary party, who do you think will end up paying for it? We haven't asked you for money for the anniversary party, Vanessa protested. Yet, I said, but I can read the writing on the wall. Mom's already mentally planning it, and Tyler just realized how much money your family actually spent on your wedding. How long do you think it'll be before the hints start, before the family obligation guilt kicks in? My cousin David's wife leaned over to whisper something in his ear, and he nodded grimly. I suspected they were making mental notes to limit their own financial exposure to family expectations in the future. You're being unfair, my mother said again, but her protests were getting weaker. I'm being realistic. And the reality is that I've enabled this family's dysfunction for years by constantly saying yes, constantly sacrificing, constantly putting everyone else's needs before my own. Well, not anymore. What does that mean? Vanessa asked nervously. It means the Bank of Alicia is officially closed. It means I'm done being the family's financial backup plan. It means the next time someone in this family needs money, they'll have to figure it out themselves or ask someone else. The room went quiet again, but this time it felt different. It felt final. 3 weeks later, I was still replaying that Thanksgiving dinner conversation in my mind when my phone rang at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen, and I debated letting it go to voicemail. We hadn't spoken since I'd walked out of my parents' house, and I wasn't particularly eager to break that streak, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered on the 4th ring. Alicia. Vanessa's voice sounded small and shaky. I need to talk to you. If this is about an apology for Thanksgiving, you're about 3 weeks late. If it's about money, the answer is no. It's not about money. Well, not exactly. Can you meet me somewhere? Please? It's important. Something in her tone made me pause. Vanessa sounded genuinely distressed, not just her usual dramatic flair when things weren't going her way. What's wrong? I can't talk about it over the phone. Please, Alicia. I know you're angry with me, but I really need my sister right now. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown. When I arrived, I found Vanessa already there, hunched over a lukewarm cup of coffee with dark circles under her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. You look terrible, I said, sliding into the seat across from her. Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear. What's going on, Vanessa? And please don't tell me you and Tyler need money for couples counseling or something. Tyler left me. The words hit me like a physical blow. Whatever I'd been expecting, it wasn't that. What? When? 2 days ago. He packed a bag and moved in with his bandmate Derek. He said he needed space to figure things out. I studied my sister's face, looking for signs of manipulation or exaggeration, but all I saw was genuine pain. What happened? The money thing really messed with his head. After Thanksgiving, he kept asking questions about our finances, about how much you'd actually paid for things. He started going through our wedding expenses, adding everything up. And he realized that almost everything about our wedding was funded by you. The venue, the food, the flowers, the photographer, everything that made it special. He said it made him feel like our whole marriage was built on a lie. I felt a flicker of sympathy for Tyler, which surprised me. It wasn't a lie, Vanessa. You two love each other. Do we? Because apparently, while I was telling Tyler that Mom and Dad were helping with wedding costs, he was assuming they could afford to be generous because Dad's business was doing well. When he found out the truth, that you'd emptied your savings account for us, he felt like I'd deceived him. You did deceive him. I didn't mean to. I just didn't want him to feel bad about accepting help. I thought once we were married, it wouldn't matter where the money came from. I sipped my coffee, processing this information. So, Tyler left because he found out I paid for your wedding. He left because he said he doesn't know who I really am. He said if I could lie about something that big, what else was I lying about? He started questioning everything about our relationship. The irony wasn't lost on me. Tyler had left Vanessa for the same reason I'd exploded at Thanksgiving, just from the opposite direction. We'd both realized we'd been living with a version of my sister that wasn't entirely real. I'm sorry this happened, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want to see Vanessa's marriage fall apart. Are you? Because part of me thinks you're happy about this. You get to be right about Tyler not being good enough, about us being irresponsible. I never said Tyler wasn't good enough. I said you two weren't ready to get married if you couldn't afford your own wedding. Same thing. No, it's not. And no, I'm not happy about your marriage falling apart. I'm sad for you, but I'm not surprised that lies eventually have consequences. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. Did you know this would happen? When you brought up the money at Thanksgiving, did you know it would destroy my marriage? I considered the question carefully. I knew Tyler would eventually find out the truth about who paid for what. I thought he already knew. Most couples discuss their finances before getting married. That's not what I asked. No, Vanessa. I didn't set out to destroy your marriage. I was angry about being humiliated in front of our entire family, and I reacted emotionally. But I'm not sorry the truth came out. Secrets like that have a way of poisoning relationships anyway. So what am I supposed to do now? You're supposed to figure out how to be honest with your husband and rebuild trust. You're supposed to take responsibility for the choices you made instead of expecting other people to fix them for you. I can't afford the apartment without Tyler's income. And there it was, the real reason for this coffee shop meeting. Despite her claims that this wasn't about money, everything always came back to money with my family. I'm not giving you money for rent, Vanessa. I didn't ask for that. You didn't have to, but the answer is still no. Then what am I supposed to do? Move back in with Mom and Dad? You're 26 years old with a college degree. You're supposed to get a job and support yourself like most adults do. I have a job. I work at the boutique. 20 hours a week selling overpriced jewelry to tourists is not a job, it's a hobby. You need a real career, with real income and real financial independence. Vanessa stared into her coffee cup. Tyler said the same thing. He said I act like a child who expects other people to take care of me. Tyler's not wrong. You really think I'm that pathetic? I looked at my sister, really looked at her. And for the first time in years, I saw past the golden child facade to the insecure woman underneath. I think you're smart and capable, but you've been enabled your entire life to avoid taking responsibility for yourself. I think you could be amazing if you stopped expecting other people to solve your problems. And I think you've been jealous of me your entire life, and you're enjoying watching me fail. The accusation stung because there was a grain of truth in it. Not the enjoying her failure part, but the jealousy. I had been jealous of how easily everything seemed to come to Vanessa, how effortlessly she captured everyone's attention and affection. Maybe I have been jealous, I admitted. But this isn't about revenge, Vanessa. This is about consequences. You made choices, and now you're dealing with the results of those choices. With no help from my family. You've had plenty of help from your family, $80,000 worth, plus a lifetime of emotional support and preferential treatment. Maybe it's time you learn to help yourself. Vanessa stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I should have known you'd be like this. Cold and practical, just like always. And you should work on being honest and responsible, just like never. She walked away without another word, leaving me sitting alone with 2 half-empty coffee cups and the satisfaction of finally saying exactly what I'd been thinking for years. But as I drove home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. I was right. 2 weeks after the coffee shop confrontation, my phone started ringing with increasing frequency. First it was my mother, her voice carefully controlled as she explained that Vanessa was going through a difficult time, and maybe I could extend some sisterly support. Then it was my father, taking a more direct approach and asking if I could help Vanessa with her rent, just until she gets back on her feet. I said no to both of them. Then my Aunt Patricia called, having heard through the family grapevine about Vanessa's marital problems. She suggested that perhaps I was being a bit harsh, and that family should stick together during difficult times. My cousin David's wife sent a carefully worded text about how family relationships were more important than money. I said no to all of them. But it was my grandmother's call that nearly broke my resolve. "Alicia, dear," she said in her gentle voice that had soothed countless childhood hurts. "I know you're upset with your sister, but she's really struggling. She's lost weight, she looks terrible, and she's talking about moving back home. Your parents are beside themselves. Grandma, I love you, but this isn't my problem to solve. She's your sister. She's my adult sister who needs to learn how to take care of herself. Don't you think you're being a little hard on her? She made some mistakes, but haven't we all?" It was emotional manipulation wrapped in genuine concern, and it almost worked. Almost. "Grandma, would you respect me less if I told you I was tired of being the family's financial safety net?" There was a long pause. "Oh, sweetheart, is that what this is about?" "Partly, but it's also about the fact that every time Vanessa faces consequences for her choices, someone in this family steps in to rescue her. How is she ever going to learn to be responsible if we keep enabling her irresponsibility?" "You sound very wise, dear. But sometimes wisdom feels awfully cold." After that call, I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I should help Vanessa one more time. Maybe I was letting my resentment cloud my judgment. Then I got the call that changed everything. It was 8 p.m. on a Friday when Vanessa's number flashed on my phone again. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Alicia? Her voice was different this time, not pleading or manipulative, but flat and tired. What is it, Vanessa? I need to tell you something. About the wedding money. What about it? Tyler and I went through all the receipts and bank statements. We've been trying to figure out exactly how much we owe you so we can start making payments. This was unexpected. Okay. The thing is, we found some discrepancies. Some of the amounts don't match what you said at Thanksgiving. My stomach dropped. What kind of discrepancies? The honeymoon expenses, for one. You said you paid for our flights and resort upgrades in Cabo. But I have the credit card statements right here, and Tyler paid for those himself. $7,000 on his credit card. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's not possible. It is possible, because I'm looking at the statements right now. Tyler's been paying the minimum balance on that debt for 6 months. We've also been paying for our own apartment this whole time, not you. And the engagement party expenses you mentioned? Mom and Dad paid for those. The room started spinning. Vanessa, I have receipts for everything. Do you? Because Tyler and I would really like to see them. We want to pay you back for what we actually owe, but we need to know the real number. My mind was racing. How could the amounts be wrong? I'd been so careful, so meticulous in tracking every expense. I'd been angry for months about the financial burden I'd carried for their wedding, and now Vanessa was telling me half of those expenses hadn't actually been mine. Can you email me the statements you're looking at? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Already done. Check your email. I put the call on speaker and opened my laptop, pulling up my email account. There were indeed several messages from Vanessa with attachment files. Bank statements, credit card bills, receipts, all organized and labeled. As I opened the documents, a cold realization began to settle over me. Tyler had paid for significantly more of their wedding expenses than I'd realized. The honeymoon costs I'd been resentful about were entirely on his credit card. Several vendor payments I thought I'd made had actually come from my parents' account. Vanessa, I said slowly, I need to check my own records. I think there might have been some confusion. Confusion about what? About who paid for what. Give me a day to go through everything and get back to you. After we hung up, I spent the next 3 hours going through every receipt, every bank statement, every transaction record from the past year. What I found made me physically ill. The actual amount I'd contributed to Vanessa's wedding was $32,000, not $80,000. Still a significant sum, but not the massive financial burden I'd been carrying in my mind for 6 months. The other expenses had been real, but my memory had somehow conflated them all into one giant debt I was owed. Tyler had handled more of the costs than anyone had given him credit for. My parents had contributed more than I'd remembered, and I had been nursing a resentment based on incomplete and inaccurate information. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I'd humiliated my sister in front of our entire family over numbers that were wrong. I'd destroyed her marriage by exposing financial details that weren't even accurate. I'd positioned myself as the long-suffering victim of family exploitation when the reality was far more complex. Sitting alone in my apartment at midnight, surrounded by financial documents and the wreckage of my righteous indignation, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. My anger had been justified, but my facts had been wrong. And in my rush to finally stand up for myself, I'd potentially destroyed my sister's life over a lie I'd been telling myself for months. The worst part was that I wasn't even sure how I'd gotten the numbers so wrong. Had I been so eager to feel victimized that I'd inflated my own contributions? Had my resentment been so deep that I'd unconsciously exaggerated the injustice to justify my anger? I needed to call Vanessa back. I needed to apologize, to explain, to somehow fix what I'd broken. But first, I needed to figure out how I'd managed to convince myself that I'd given my sister $50,000 more than I actually had. Because if I could be that wrong about something so important, what else in my life had I been seeing through the distorted lens of my own resentment? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a calculator, and every financial document I could find, trying to piece together how I'd constructed such an elaborate fiction about my sister's wedding expenses. The truth was more disturbing than I wanted to admit. I had been keeping track of the expenses, but somewhere along the way, my anger had started doing the accounting. Every time I felt overlooked or underappreciated by my family, I'd unconsciously added another perceived slight to Vanessa's debt. The resentment had compounded like interest, growing larger and more distorted with each passing month. The $7,000 honeymoon expense had been real, but I'd paid for my parents to join them for 2 days, not for Tyler and Vanessa's entire trip. The engagement party costs had been shared between my parents and me, not entirely my responsibility. Even some of the wedding vendor payments had been split in ways I'd forgotten or chosen not to remember. By dawn, I had a clear picture of my actual financial contribution. $32,467. Still substantial, still worth acknowledging, but not the martyrdom-inducing sum I'd been carrying around like a cross. I called in sick to work and drove to Vanessa's apartment. She answered the door in pajamas, her hair unwashed and her eyes red-rimmed. She looked even worse than she had at the coffee shop. "I need to apologize," I said, without preamble. "For what?" "For being wrong about the money. For humiliating you at Thanksgiving with numbers that weren't accurate. For contributing to the destruction of your marriage with my self-righteous anger." Vanessa stepped aside to let me in. The apartment was a mess. Dishes piled in the sink, laundry scattered across the furniture. This wasn't Vanessa's usual carelessness. This was depression. "So you figured out the real numbers?" $32,467, I said. I don't know how I convinced myself it was $80,000. I think I wanted to feel like a victim so badly that I inflated my own martyrdom. "Tyler's been trying to call you," she said, settling onto the couch. "He wants to apologize too." "For what? He didn't do anything wrong. He left me without trying to work things out. When he found out about the money discrepancy, he realized he'd been too hasty. He said he let his pride get in the way of his marriage." This was an unexpected development. "Are you two getting back together?" "I don't know. He wants to try counseling, but I'm not sure I trust him not to run away again the next time things get complicated." I sat down across from her, feeling the weight of my mistakes. "Vanessa, I'm sorry. I was angry about a lot of things that had nothing to do with your wedding, and I let that anger distort my perception of what actually happened. You were right about some things, though. I did let you pay for more than I should have. I did take your contributions for granted, and I should have been more honest with Tyler about where the money was coming from. But I was wrong about the scale of it, and I was wrong to air our family's business the way I did at Thanksgiving. Actually," Vanessa said, looking thoughtful, "I think I needed to hear some of those things. Maybe not in front of the whole family, but I needed to hear them." "What do you mean?" "The stuff about me being enabled, about not taking responsibility for myself. Tyler said some of the same things. Maybe there's truth in it that I've been avoiding." I studied my sister's face, seeing something I'd never noticed before. Beneath the hurt and exhaustion, there was something that looked like determination. "I got a real job," she continued. "Full-time marketing coordinator at a nonprofit downtown. It doesn't pay much, but it's a start." "That's great, Vanessa, really. And I've been thinking about what you said, about learning to be independent. Maybe you were right that everyone's been rescuing me too much. Maybe I need to figure out how to rescue myself." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Vanessa got up to answer it, and I was surprised to see Tyler standing in the hallway with flowers and a nervous expression. "I'm sorry," he said to Vanessa. "I know I should have called first, but I wanted to see if you were okay." "Alicia's here," Vanessa said, stepping aside. She came to apologize about the money situation. Tyler's eyes met mine over Vanessa's head. I owe you an apology too. I should have been more understanding about the whole situation. And I definitely shouldn't have walked out on my marriage without trying to work things through first. Tyler, you don't owe me anything. I'm the one who created this mess with my inaccurate information and my public outburst. But you were right about one thing, he said. Vanessa and I should have been more honest with each other about our finances from the beginning. If we'd talked openly about who was paying for what, none of this would have happened. I looked back and forth between them, seeing something I hadn't expected. Growth. Both of them looked older somehow, more serious, like they'd been forced to mature quickly under pressure. Are you two going to be okay? I asked. We're going to try, Vanessa said. Tyler found a therapist who specializes in couples counseling. We have our first appointment next week. And I talked to my boss about picking up some freelance work, Tyler added. The band is still important to me, but I need to be more financially responsible. I felt a mix of relief and lingering guilt. Maybe my explosion at Thanksgiving had ultimately led to positive changes, but I still regretted the way I'd handled everything. There's something else, Vanessa said. I want to pay you back. The $32,000. It might take a while, but I want to set up a payment plan. Vanessa, you don't have to. Yes, I do. You were right that I never acknowledged your sacrifice. This is me acknowledging it. The gesture meant more to me than the money itself. For the first time in our adult relationship, Vanessa was taking responsibility and initiative instead of waiting for someone else to solve her problems. 2 months later, I was having dinner with my parents when my father brought up what he now referred to as the Thanksgiving incident. Have you talked to your sister lately? He asked, cutting into his salmon. We text pretty regularly now, I said. She and Tyler seem to be working things out in counseling. And the money situation? She's been making payments. Small ones, but consistent. She's taking it seriously. My mother, who had been notably quiet during most of our recent family interactions, finally spoke up. I owe you an apology, Alicia. I nearly choked on my wine. In 29 years, I couldn't remember my mother ever directly apologizing to me for anything. For what? For the way I've treated you compared to Vanessa. For taking your contributions for granted. For making you feel like you weren't valued in this family. My father nodded. We both owe you an apology. After Thanksgiving, we did a lot of thinking about family dynamics, and we realized we haven't been fair to you. This was not the conversation I'd expected to have. Mom? Dad? You don't have to. Yes, we do, my mother interrupted. I've been thinking about what you said, about when I last called just to check on you, about when I last bragged about your accomplishments. You were right. I haven't been a very good mother to you. The admission hung in the air between us. I'd wanted to hear these words for years, but now that they were finally being said, I felt more sad than vindicated. I think we all got caught up in patterns that weren't healthy, I said carefully. Vanessa told us about the real wedding expenses, my father said. She also told us you came to apologize when you realized your numbers were wrong. That took character, Alicia. It took honesty. Something I should have practiced more carefully from the beginning. We're proud of you, my mother said suddenly. Your job, your independence, the way you've handled this whole situation. We should have said that years ago. The words I'd been waiting my entire life to hear were finally being spoken, but they felt complicated now. I was grateful for them, but I also recognized that they were coming in the aftermath of a family crisis that could have been avoided if we'd all been more honest with each other from the start. Thank you, I said. That means a lot to me. Your grandmother wants to have a family dinner next weekend, my father continued. She's been worried about all of us since Thanksgiving. Would you be willing to come? Will Vanessa and Tyler be there? If you're comfortable with that. I considered it. The thought of another family dinner still made me nervous. But maybe it was time to try rebuilding rather than just reacting. Okay, but let's agree that family dinners are for celebrating each other, not for airing grievances or making comparisons. Agreed, my mother said quickly. The following Saturday, I found myself back at my grandmother's house, the same house where I'd spent countless childhood holidays. But this time felt different. Vanessa and Tyler arrived together, holding hands but looking slightly nervous. My parents were more subdued than usual, clearly making an effort to treat both daughters equally in their attention and conversation. Alicia, my grandmother said, pulling me aside before dinner, I'm proud of how you've handled this situation. It takes strength to admit when you're wrong, and it takes even more strength to forgive. I'm still working on the forgiving part, Grandma. That's honest. But you're here, and that's a start. During dinner, something remarkable happened. My father asked about my latest project at work, and actually listened to my answer without changing the subject. My mother complimented Vanessa's new job, but didn't dismiss my career achievements in the process. Tyler talked about his music, but also mentioned his new freelance work. Vanessa shared updates about their counseling without seeking excessive sympathy or attention. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments and careful conversations, but it felt like the beginning of something healthier. After dinner, Vanessa approached me in the kitchen while I was helping with dishes. I have something for you, she said, pulling an envelope from her purse. Inside was a check for $500 and a handwritten note. This is the first real payment toward what I owe you, she said. Not just the money, but the acknowledgement and respect I should have given you all along. I looked at the note, which was longer than any thank you message Vanessa had ever written me. It detailed specific things she was grateful for, specific sacrifices I'd made that she was finally recognizing, and specific commitments she was making to change her behavior going forward. Vanessa, this is long overdue, she finished. I know I can't change the past, but I want to do better going forward. Tyler and I are both working on being more responsible, more honest, and more grateful for the people who've supported us. How are things with you two? Better. Harder, but better. We're learning how to talk about difficult things instead of avoiding them. And we're learning how to build a marriage that doesn't depend on other people's money or approval. Looking at my sister, I realized she looked different. Not just the weight loss or the tiredness, but something deeper. She looked more substantial somehow, more real. I'm proud of you, I said, meaning it. Thank you. That means everything coming from you. As we finished cleaning up together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope for our relationship. Not the old dynamic where I sacrificed and she received, but something more balanced and honest. Alicia, Vanessa said as we were putting away the last of the dishes. I know I don't have the right to ask this, but would you be willing to be in my life differently going forward? Not as the sister who fixes my problems, but as the sister who celebrates my successes and supports me in becoming better? I'd like that, I said. But it goes both ways. I need to feel valued and appreciated, not just useful. Deal, she said, extending her hand for a handshake. Deal, I agreed, shaking it. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a new beginning. 6 months after that family dinner, I was sitting in my office reviewing quarterly budget reports when my assistant knocked on my door. There's someone here to see you, she said. Your sister? I looked up, surprised. Vanessa rarely visited my workplace, and we hadn't scheduled anything. Send her in. Vanessa appeared in my doorway, wearing a professional-looking dress I'd never seen before, her hair neatly styled, carrying a small gift bag. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important, she said. Just boring spreadsheets. What brings you by? 2 things. First, I wanted to give you this. She handed me the gift bag. Inside was a framed photo from her wedding day, but not one of the typical pose shots I'd seen before. This one showed me in the background, looking proud and happy as I watched the ceremony. I remembered the moment. It was right after Vanessa had said her vows, and despite all the stress and expense, I'd felt genuinely joyful for her. "I found this when I was going through the wedding photos," she said. "I realized I'd never given you any pictures from the day, which was awful of me. But I wanted you to have this one because it shows what the day really meant to both of us." The gesture touched me more than I'd expected. "Thank you. This is perfect." The second thing is bigger news. Tyler and I are buying a house. "That's wonderful. Congratulations." "We wanted to invite you to the housewarming party, but more importantly, I wanted you to know that we're buying it entirely with our own money. No family loans, no financial help, no parental co-signers. Just what we've saved and what the bank approved us for based on our actual income." The pride in her voice was unmistakable, and I felt a corresponding surge of pride for her. "Vanessa, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you both. It's a small house and it needs work, but it's ours. Tyler's freelance work has really taken off, and my nonprofit job led to a better position at a marketing firm. We're finally living within our means and building something sustainable. How does it feel? Scary and exciting and real, like we're finally growing up?" I came around my desk to hug her, something that had become easier between us over the past few months. "There's one more thing," she said as we separated. "I made the last payment on what I owed you yesterday. We're officially even." The check I'd received in the mail that morning had indeed been larger than her usual monthly payment, and I'd wondered about it. "You didn't have to pay it all off so quickly." "Yes, I did. I wanted to start fresh in our new house, without any family debt hanging over us. And I wanted to prove to myself that I could follow through on my commitments." Looking at my sister, I marveled at the change in her over the past year. The woman standing in my office was confident, responsible, and genuinely happy in a way that didn't depend on other people's approval or financial support. "I'm really proud of who you've become," I said. "I'm proud of who I've always been too," she replied. "I just had to learn how to see it myself instead of waiting for other people to show me." After Vanessa left, I sat back in my chair and reflected on the journey we'd all taken since that explosive Thanksgiving dinner. My relationships with my parents had improved significantly. They made more effort to show interest in my life and accomplishments, and I made more effort to appreciate their attempts to change old patterns. Tyler had become someone I genuinely liked and respected. His willingness to examine his own role in their financial problems and work to become more responsible had impressed me. He and Vanessa seemed genuinely happy together now, but in a more mature way than before. As for me, I'd learned some difficult lessons about the difference between justified anger and distorted resentment. I'd also learned that sometimes explosive honesty, even when it's messy and imperfect, can lead to healthier relationships in the long run. My phone buzzed with a text from my grandmother. "Family dinner this Sunday. Can you make it? Your aunt is making her famous apple pie." I smiled and texted back, "Wouldn't miss it." A year later, Vanessa and Tyler sent me a photo from their first anniversary. Not a lavish party or expensive celebration, but a quiet dinner at home in their new house with a cake they'd baked themselves. The caption read, "Celebrating 1 year of marriage and 6 months of complete financial independence. Thank you for teaching us both what real family support looks like." The transformation wasn't just in their finances or their relationship. It was in their understanding of what it meant to be adults, partners, and family members. They'd learned to build their happiness on their own foundation rather than on other people's sacrifices. And I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is refuse to enable their dependence, even when it causes short-term pain for everyone involved. In the months that followed the Thanksgiving confrontation, the entire family faced a reckoning that went far beyond the financial disputes. My mother struggled with the realization that her favoritism had damaged both her daughters and spent considerable time in therapy learning to rebuild relationships based on equity rather than preference. My father, humbled by his role in the family's dysfunctional dynamics, made deliberate efforts to show equal interest and pride in both his children's achievements. Tyler's credit suffered from the wedding debt he'd hidden, and he spent over a year rebuilding his financial reputation while learning to communicate honestly about money with his wife. Vanessa faced the hardest consequences of all, losing not just her financial safety net, but her identity as the protected favorite child, forcing her to develop genuine independence and self-worth for the first time in her adult life. Looking back on that explosive Thanksgiving dinner, I realize it was the moment I stopped being a victim of my family's dysfunction and started being an architect of healthier relationships, even when the construction process was painful and messy for everyone involved.